This is the audio oscillator and driver for the amplifier. We're using an EICO Model 377 as the platform. This is very much beefed up for really strong Class A2 grid drive. What we have here is it has both an internal oscillator, which is this. It also has capability to input an external oscillator, and we can see that with this one over here. There's two of them, one for each side, side A, side B. If we turn this one on, we can see how it works. We look at the internal oscillator. If you flip this switch to the left, the switch actually points to this oscillator. So this oscillator is now live. We're on let's see, channel B. The pointer's pointing on B, somewhere around 1,000 hertz frequency. And if we look at it on the scope, there it is. There's your 1,000 hertz. If we switch it to square wave, the signal becomes a square. But we want accuracy, and we don't really care about the internal amp there. And so we're going to run a Fieldtech dual channel function arbitrary waveform generator. This piece is very accurate. It's modeled after the Spooky 2. Stanley, if you're watching this, this is the generator you sent me. It's very good. If you wanted to know which generator it is Fieldtech brand. And if we look at the model number on this side, it's the FY2300. I think that block there on the bottom means it goes to 20 megahertz. And we have channel 1 connected to a BNC cable. We're going to take the other side of the BNC cable. We're going to plug it into our EICO amplifier down here. We're going to switch the switch over to external signal, and now this amp is getting an external signal. It's getting it off the Fieldtech generator. The Fieldtech generator is set at 1 kilohertz, and it's a triangle wave. Let's see, but we're seeing a square wave on the screen, but that's because the EICO actually has a square wave setting. So we switch it back to sine setting, and we have our triangle wave inputted. We're actually seeing a triangle wave on the screen now. If you want to see a sine wave on the screen, you would hit your waveform, change it back to sine. There's sine, and a sine wave appears on the screen. So that's your amp. That's your driver working off of an external amp. And if you want, this driver was designed for Class A2 operation. That means we had to add it to the EICO platform. So Class A2 actually comes out of this port here. So in order to view this amplifier in Class 2, we need to turn this port on, which is this switch here. When you press it that way, the tube, the vacuum tube that drives this port, is now warming up, and it's going to output the signal on this port, and that'll give you your main amplifier its full class 2 operation drive, which is a very strong drive. It'll light a plasma tube from the main amp. So we're going to take our scope and we're going to compare what we have going on here. Okay, the scope is actually hooked up to the regular EICO, the outputs, the regular outputs. And if we turn the signal all the way up to full, there it is, full, we can see that we have, let's gauge our amplitude here. Let's see. We're set on 1 volt per square per division. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divisions high. So that's 6 volts high. We're running a divider by 10 probe, so times 6 by 10. This is a 60 volt amplitude coming out of this amplifier. Now, since let's look at our second output. I'm going to take the scope probe, plug it into the second output, and we come back over here. The second output is actually, it's not boosted in voltage, but it's boosted in power. And the voltage actually went down a little bit. We have how many divisions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. So this is actually 45 volts. But this 45 volts coming out of the second port, the class A2 driver port, that will run the main amp much stronger. And it's designed to run the main amp as strong as it can possibly go, because we're trying to light a plasma tube with it. And once again, we're inputting a sine wave from the field tech into this amplifier, but I can switch it down here to square wave. Let's see, the scope probe fell out. Let me plug it back in. There it is. Now we're seeing a square wave on the screen, and if you'll notice it, the square wave actually has a higher amplitude than the sine wave. Let's measure the amplitude. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We came back to our 60 volt amplitude. So these amps are really putting out. When you run this amp, they put out so much power that the tubes heat up inside pretty good. So it has a cooling fan on top, and I would say the duty cycle on this amp is about 10 minutes. I would run it for 10 minutes at a time and then let it rest, let it cool down. In order to let it cool down, what you do is you turn your second amp off and just let it cool down for 5 or 10 minutes before you run it again. So, I mean, you could run it for 15 minutes, but I would say the duty cycle on this is 10 to 15 minutes. If you run it for a half hour or hours at a time, you'll burn it out. It's just too much for it. I wouldn't run it all night long. I would run it 10 minutes at a time. I would run a single frequency.